And as of such, about once a month, every other month, I go to dump the box out and I look through for things that either no longer interest me or maybe some other author has already covered, so it's no longer good to me. It's dead to me, so I have to get rid of it, make some room. But what happens when I flip that over, sometimes weird things will end up next to each other on the floor. That little bit of science, that little bit of history, I would have never in my own head connected the two together. Because they just happen to end up randomly on the floor next to each other, I'll go, well, hey, I can see threads that might connect those two together. And then I'll investigate, and sometimes I'll find out, no, it doesn't really hold together. Other times it will start blooming into even more connections, and if it's something more interesting, and that will build the next novel. So I'm going to tell you just a couple things that came out of that box that were the basis for this novel. I'm not going to tell you how they connect, of course, because you know why. I don't care if you read it, just. I'll tell you that the science that came out of that box that became the beginning of this novel. And the science deals with nanotechnology. Now, a lot of people think nanotechnology is science fiction. It's something from the future. It's nothing that has to do with present-day reality, and that is not at all true, not even vaguely true. Nanotechnology has been a $90 billion industry in the U.S. last year. $90 billion of nano products were sold in the U.S. market. You will find nanoparticles in everything from toothpaste to sunscreen to cosmetics to incorporated into different types of linens like running socks and even other types of clothing. So it's pretty much everywhere. Right now, probably all of us have some type of nanoparticles on our body without even knowing it. Now, for me as a thriller writer, the fun and disconcerting thing about that is that there's very little safety studies required for nano products. And just recently, within the last 2 years, scientists are now beginning to go, wait a second, things are a little bit funky with this stuff. UCLA scientists have found out that some of the nano-titanium oxide that's found in children's sunscreen can actually cause damage to animals at the genetic level. So it might protect you against skin cancer, but you'll grow a third eye right here. So carbon nanotubules, which are, again, very commonly found in a lot of products, has been shown to accumulate in the lungs and in the brains of mice, which cause who knows what type of damage. And right now, there's absolutely no requirement of labeling. If you have that toothpaste that has nanoparticles in it, you can check everywhere on that label. You will never find out anything that there's actually incorporated nanoparticles. They're not required to put it on the ingredient list or anywhere on that packaging. Again, like I said before, very little safety studies are required on those nanoparticles, so they can literally just put things in these products without very little testing behind them, without even telling you they're in that product. As a thriller writer, that's really cool. And I like that concept. So I thought, well, what if something goes awry with that whole industry? And that ties into a little bit of history, which because there's actually some indications that there was once upon a time ancient nanotechnology, some fingerprints in the past that possibly alchemists in the Middle Ages were actually manipulating matter at the atomic level. I'll give you one example, maybe two examples. Damascus steel is a type of steel formed in Syria they were sword makers. A usually strong steel. They were incorporated. Actually, the steel came out of an ore out of India called Wootz ore, or Wootz steel. But what was weird about the steel is that it was unusually strong, unusually resilient. The recipe for making this steel was very secretive. They would not allow anybody to know how they were making this steel. Middle Ages, they lost that recipe, and to this day, we cannot replicate that steel. We cannot, even with the modern technology, we cannot recreate that steel. We now know what they were doing, we just don't know how they did it. They did some electron microscopy of the steel. They found out that there's actually nanotubules built into that steel, and there's nano wires wound through that steel, holding it. That's why it's extra resilient and extra strong. Medieval glass. There's certain colors of medieval glass that's in different types of cathedrals around Europe. There's a hue of ruby glass that's very striking. Again, to this day, we cannot replicate that color of stained glass. Again, scientists have studied it. Why? Well, bound in that glass are gold nanospheres. To this day, we can't even create gold nanospheres. But in that leaded glass are gold nanospheres. So for me, as I'm wondering what did those medieval alchemists in the past know back then that we didn't know today? Was it accidental? Was it just purely a matter of the manufacturing process artificially creating these? Or was there potentially some knowledge behind that? Why were these recipes kept secret? Why were they lost? What became of them?